Steph and I are here from Scopism. We're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of SIAM, and this is our agenda for today. So we're going to talk about the history of SIAM, just touching briefly on where it's come from so that we can then talk about how it's evolved. We're going to talk about the drivers for SIAM and global adoption rates as well. So this is based on research that we do at Scopism. And we're also going to talk about the project that is consuming myself, Steph, and many others in the Scopism community this year, which is the Body of Knowledge refresh. So we've got quite a lot of people from our author team and our community here. So nice to see you all with us. But for anybody who's not aware of this, we'll kind of talk about the scope of that as well. I'm going to hand over to Steph then at the end, who's going to share some feedback from the community and tell you a little bit about how to get involved if you would like to learn more about SIAM. Okay, so beginning with the history of SIAM. So going back to the very dark ages of IT, which was when I started my career, we were working in organizations that didn't really have any IT systems or quite basic IT systems. And there was a lot of paper flying around. There was a lot of filing cabinets, but gradually IT systems started to get a little bit more important. And this is kind of going back to 1980s, 1990s. And this is when things like ITIL first developed. So IT became more important. We needed to be able to manage it. We needed to be able to demonstrate some return on investment from it. So the formalization of some structures and some management methodologies around IT first started. Then, as IT got more complex, organizations started to specialize, and we saw first generation outsourcing contracts coming into existence. So these were typically quite long-term monolithic contracts. There may be one service provider. We would typically see 10 to 15-year contracts for some of these. And they did deliver benefits. So they did deliver benefits to organizations being able to access knowledge, access systems that they wouldn't be able to purchase and manage themselves. But they also threw quite a lot of challenges as well. So vendor lock-in, loss of data ownership were some significant concerns. And also just the fact that when you're working with one organization, elements of that contract might be very cost efficient and perform well, but other elements were not performing as well or were priced far exceeding the market rate. So those first generation outsourcing contracts taught us some lessons as well about how to procure IT. That then led to the rise of second generation outsourcing, which was the transition to multiple providers. And this is the kind of the early days of service integration. So as service integration first came into being, you heard things like MSI, multi-supplier integration, or multi-service integration. And the contracts were fairly simple. They were grouped into towers. So maybe the applications tower, end user compute tower, support tower. They gave organizations the opportunity to select some best of breed providers, but again, challenges in the day-to-day operation in terms of the fact that there were silos, and it became more difficult to see the big picture end to end. So again, benefits, but also operational challenges as with most things that we do in business. And this is where SIAM really started to kind of come into its own, because SIAM, which came from UK government initially, just like ITIL did, a lot of the early serious thinking around SIAM was done in organisations like the NHS, like the Department for Work and Pensions, and also supported by some of the big MSPs that were involved in those contracts as well. But SIAM exists now to give organizations the opportunity to create that balance between having access to the best of breed providers and also having the ability to effectively manage these services end to end. It introduces this concept of a service integrator, which is a function that is responsible for having that end to end governance and management of all the different components of our service jigsaw. And ultimately, what that allows us to do is create a flexible delivery system that is resilient as the world changes, as our strategy changes. SIAM gives us an operating model that is much more adaptable. We can offboard, we can onboard service providers as we need to, and we can knit in the internal teams that are involved in service delivery as well. And I think a really good example to give at this point is thinking about some of the recent data that's come out about AI adoption. So a lot of the recent data coming out of organizations like Gartner about AI adoption has shown that the internal proof of concepts that organizations are doing are not delivering value, or CIOs are unable to measure whether those are delivering any value. So the most recent data shows that a lot of organizations are now shifting to commercial off-the-shelf AI solutions and working with third parties, which it does make sense considering the skills that are needed and the kind of capabilities that these organizations need to have. But it also requires an operating model that allows you to onboard those service providers, integrate those services. So that's the kind of organizational structure, the benefits that SIAM is going to deliver. And a little bit about Scopism and SIAM, so why Steph and myself are here talking to you. It's kind of important to emphasize that we didn't invent SIAM at Scopism. We don't own it. It's not ours. The first use of SIAM in the UK public sector goes back to around about 2005. And at that point, I was very much involved, I think, in trying to fix the change management process at the Highways Agency, I suspect at that point. But that's when SIAM came about. But back in 2016, I was running a service management training business, a lot of service management experience behind me, and set up Scopism as a company to give me an opportunity to play around with a few new ideas. And one of the things I could see that I thought looked really, really interesting was SIAM. And the unique thing about SIAM at the time was nobody had written a book. So if you wanted to learn more about SIAM, if you did a search, you'd find some blogs, you'd find some of the big MSPs who had SIAM in their service portfolio. But at the time, I thought, wouldn't it be a brilliant idea if we just wrote something about this? So from my network, we had a huge group of volunteers. I think there was kind of 40 plus in the first author group, and we had MSPs, we had small consultancies, we had customer side organizations, and we wrote the foundation body of knowledge. And really, SIAM's grown from there, and Scopism's grown from there as well. So the partnership with Exin to launch certification for SIAM, the professional body of knowledge. We started doing our annual research with the Global SIAM Survey. We've got a SIAM conference. We've got a maturity assessment that we run for organizations. And then in 2023, we launched the SIAM community as well. And Steph is our wonderful community manager for that. And I'm going to come on to the fact that we're in our second body of knowledge refresh. But one of the key things with Scopism is that we work with the community. So the body of knowledge is written with input from a huge amount of people in the global community, and we make that freely available so anybody can come and download the body of knowledge. Steph's going to put some links up at the end to show you where to do that. Our research is free to access, our community is free to access, and even things like the events and conferences that we run, we keep those as low priced as possible because we know that this is all about the community and the SIAM knowledge that we have. Very much, we're growing this together. So thinking a little bit about the drivers for SIAM, our research shows that SIAM continues to grow. It's widely adopted around the world. So really this kind of comes back to, well, what do organizations want? Nobody engages with any kind of transformation program or adopts any new behaviors just for fun. So really we need to think about what do organizations want. And we had a group in the community last year looking at, in effect, the business case for SIAM and the pitch for SIAM. And when they were doing their research into, well, why are organizations looking to transform their operating model in this way? They came up with all of these different drivers. And really, this is very much aligned to digital transformation initiatives. It's aligned to the speed of technology change. And it's also aligned to the fact that digital services are now so critical to the vast majority of business models. So these are some of the areas that came up as being absolutely important and strategically important for organizations. And you can see everything from faster prototyping and time to market, better end-to-end management, data-driven decisions, build or buy decisions, the sourcing strategy for the organization. So all of these are the things that we talk about when we go and talk to people at the C-level. We're not saying to them, you must do SIAM. We're talking to them about these drivers, and then SIAM is a model that's going to help you to be successful in these areas. And just to reinforce that with some data from our global SIAM survey. So this is last year's data. So we had respondents from, I think, about 40 countries last year. And again, we asked them, what were your strategic drivers for adopting SIAM? And you can see here, it is all about better management of these complex supply ecosystems. So better performance, able to identify where things are working, where things are not necessarily working, and wanting to have that flexibility to be able to move from either a single outsourced contract or internally hosted services to a range of external vendors. So these drivers are very tangible things. We can measure the benefits of SIAM and actually show how it is delivering these kind of cost savings, cost optimizations, these efficiencies in the organization. And just to reinforce that in terms of benefits realized as well, you can see here, these are not the fluffy benefits. These are very much things that should be tangible, should be measurable. So organizations reported things like better performance, better collaboration, easier to flex a supply ecosystem and add and remove suppliers. So the data is very much out there to show that SIAM is delivering benefits for organizations. And just a little reminder as well, we do the Global SIAM survey every year. We've done it every year since 2018. This year's survey will go live in July. It's live through July and August. So please keep an eye out for that on Scopism social media, in the Scopism community. Every year we try and make it bigger than the year before to get more data in there. So please complete and share that when you see that go live. And just to have a look at where SIAM is mature and which organizations, which countries are adopting SIAM. Again, this is from the Global SIAM survey, but you can see here where some of the top countries are. So India, very high rates of SIAM adoption there, which our belief is that's aligned to the large MSPs that are based in India. So organizations like TCS, Wipro, Infosys, HCL, LTI, Mindtree, Tech Mahindra, they're driving a lot of the SIAM adoption there. Broadly across Europe, the UK, North America is slightly less mature, but interest is growing there. And we have a partner that we're working with to continue to build that. There are some good examples of SIAM contracts in US government. And last year, for the first time as well, we saw China in the top 10 of our SIAM adoption by country. There are a lot of other countries, but this diagram just shows you the top 10. But I think it does really emphasize that SIAM is not just something that we're talking about in the UK. This is something that has a very global audience. Organisation size as well. I wanted to briefly touch on this because there is very much a perception that SIAM is only for these massive organizations with huge numbers of employees, when in fact what we're seeing is SIAM principles are now being adopted by smaller organizations. So for those organizations, we're not necessarily talking about, this massive service integrator function being stood up, but the principles of SIAM, understanding your ecosystem, building a culture of collaboration, all of those things can be adopted in a kind of a SIAM light model. Okay, so the evolution of SIAM, I think this is my last little section, but just talking about the body of knowledge refresh that we are running at the moment. So our research shows that at the moment, a lot of organizations still want to see an improvement in the results that they're getting from their multi-sourced environments. So one of the evolutions that we're seeing that is allowing SIAM to respond to that is a shift from kind of operational SIAM through to much more strategic SIAM. So a lot of the initial SIAM models were very much focused in that incident problem change space. They were about getting things operationally working together. But what we're seeing now is SIAM is being elevated, it's more tightly linked to the sourcing strategy, and it's more tightly linked to the overall organizational strategy. So SIAM is moving up now, and it's very much in that business relationship management, strategic partner space as well. So the body of knowledge refresh is allowing us to recognize that with input from the community. So those of you that have already accessed the body of knowledge will know at the moment that there is a foundation body of knowledge and there is a professional body of knowledge. Those two publications are freely available, and then there's a lot of other content in the community. The structural change that we're making in 2025 is to have one body of knowledge that then has multiple layers. So in the core of the body of knowledge will sit the existing foundation and professional publications. So those will be fairly stable. We're talking about maybe a 5-year refresh cycle for those, unless something incredibly seismic happens in the SIAM space. But then around that core, we've got a new layer, which is compendiums. And compendiums are smaller publications. They can be everything from kind of white paper length through to a small book that allow us to look at areas where SIAM is changing or areas where SIAM intersects with another area of best practice or technology. So Robin, who's up next, is talking about how SIAM and experience management fit together. And that's one of the compendiums that's in development. We've got authors who are working both with Scopism and the XLA Institute, which is just fantastic to see. So the compendiums will always be evolving, changing, growing. Ultimately, they may drop into the core, but they allow us to test new ideas and see how SIAM is changing. And then round the edge of that is the expanded layer, which is going to be anything kind of white papers, sponsored content, case studies that'll fit into that expanded layer. So that's just the general guidance that comes from the community. So this is going to be the new structure. We very much want to reflect the evolution of SIAM, but not lose the fact that it's still rooted in the real world as well. We spend a lot of time talking about things like enterprise SIAM, and I'm looking forward to the case study from Primark later on. But the vast majority of SIAM adoption is still in the IT space. So we need to reflect the real world as well and be careful we don't lose sight of that. This is a list of the compendiums that we are currently working on. So if you kind of think SIAM plus, all of these, the revised body of knowledge is going to be launched in November. So we have a face-to-face conference in Manchester in the UK where we'll have some of our author team there talking about some of these new concepts. But this is tranche 1 of compendiums, and then early 2026 we'll start to work on some of the others that didn't make the cut as well. But some really important topics there, and it's been very enjoyable digging into some of these with the author groups, and we are very, very grateful for all of the volunteers that have been involved. We've got more than 140 people who have had some level of involvement with this so far, so we're very, very grateful for all of their input. And that is it from me. So I'm just going to quickly scan the questions. Steph's replied to Banks, so thank you for that. Mike's asked, do we understand why there is such a huge discrepancy in SIAM adoption across the world? Some of it is just the general way that ideas spread. So if you think about SIAM kind of starting in the UK, starting to spread to Europe, spreading through the public sector as well. So we see a lot of SIAM adoption, for example, in Australia in the public sector. So some of it is just how ideas spread. Some of it is linked to the types and sizes of organizations in different countries. We can speculate, for example, that Germany has typically more smaller organizations, so maybe less immediate need for SIAM. And some of it, I think, is perhaps skewed as well to the fact that we as Scopism, when we do our research, we reach people who have an interest in SIAM. So I think there is an element of the fact that we have to caveat the data that we get in the survey slightly, because we are talking SIAM people, so we may be kind of getting a little bit of a skew there. But for us, we just see it as room to grow, particularly in North America and Africa's as well. We've just launched some regional partnerships, and we hope to kind of continue to spread the SIAM message. So that is all from me, but I think we'll probably have a little bit of time for questions at the end as well, and I'll hand over to Steph now.
Great, thank you. So from me, just kind of coming back a little bit to Claire's timeline, I just want to kind of dive in a little bit more to the Scopism SIAM community, why we exist, what we do, who we are, and kind of how to get involved, really. So why do we exist? Before my time, I've been with Scopism 2.5 years now and was new to the industry, but it was very clear from conversations with Claire that SIAM was evolving, and there were so many great conversations with great people, great organizations, and great innovative work that was being done. But it was hard to be able to share that and showcase that in a place where people knew it existed. So these conversations were happening in isolation, nowhere to really share and learn in addition to the bodies of knowledge. And maybe people didn't even know they existed, but nowhere for people to come and connect with and have conversations around that and hear the real world stories and challenges, in addition to things like the surveys. You know, we knew they were happening, Claire was doing great work, but we wanted to encourage these conversations between everybody, and maybe not just through Claire as well. But so we launched the Scopism SIAM community in July 2023. And as you can probably see from the graph on the screen, we've grown month on month. We're nearly reaching almost 4,000 members now. We partnered with Infosys and HCL Software to be able to bring this to the community for free and enable that connection through everybody at every stage of their journey. So from people who don't know anything about it, right through to people who've been working in it right from the very start. So this is a platform where we kind of created that. I did a lot of research in the early stages before launching to understand from the communities that perhaps existed already in, for example, the Netherlands. We went out and visited them to understand what they'd want from an online platform and how we can support that. A place where we can share the research, extend our events, and I'll come into this in a little bit more detail in the slides, but ultimately creating that network for everybody to kind of come together and do exactly what Claire wanted to really bring to everyone. Oh, and who are we then? So as I mentioned, we had our partners that enabled this to be free. We also have the partnership with Exin, our education partner, to support the training and certification elements. HCL Software then changed to HCL Tech, who've just received the first Scopism SIAM Assurance accreditation to be able to showcase their capabilities. So congrats to them. Infosys, we've renewed again for this year, and again, another partnership with them. And as Claire mentioned, to be able to support the regional areas, so Integris to support the Americas and Fox ITSM to support Africa. And amongst that, you know, across those nearly 4,000 members, we've also got our great community champions who I've seen. I believe Barry Corliss is with us today, and probably so many others. I couldn't see all the names, but really great people that we trust to be able to support our network. So with us right from the start and help shape that as well. So I work really closely with them to understand what's happening on the ground, what do we want to see, what do you see, and also closely with our members and people like the XLA Institute who we've partnered with, and I know we'll hear from Robin today, and our sponsors for events and the surveys, so to be able to bring them. So we've got Stefanini sponsoring this year's survey, as Claire mentioned, that will go out in July. And as I said, these are people at all stages of the journey across our member base. So if you don't really know much about it, but you want to learn, people who have implemented it and can share their stories and challenges and how they've overcome it. People planning to adopt it, so maybe want to learn a little bit more about it, reach out to people to work with on that, and people who sell those SIAM consultancies, technologies, and implementation solutions as well as advocates. And I know I've put 14 industries on there, but we do know it is much larger than that as well. That mirrors the global SIAM survey. So we've got the other option there, but a very diverse member base, I would say. And how do we work? So Claire mentioned the annual conference that we've run now every year since 2017. Even did that online throughout COVID, and we have all the recordings available in the Scopism SIAM community as well. We have expanded events, so things like this, and also community events that we host, webinars, podcasts. We launched a podcast in March this year, as sought after from the community. And you'll see in the top right there, we've hosted many events since launching with a number of registrations. And I didn't quite actually anticipate how big the YouTube channel was going to grow in such a short space of time. So we've launched a 6-part series called SIAM in Action that looks at the strategic and operational aspects of SIAM. And then we also have real world stories from people who've perhaps fallen into SIAM or into IT service management, but sharing their stories of how their career journey has shaped them both personally and professionally, which is getting great feedback. If you've not yet had a chance to watch them, they're in the community and on the YouTube channel. And we've got SIAM's role in sustainability coming up on the 18th of June. So yeah. Research, Claire's mentioned the global SIAM surveys, which again, we kind of have things like the discussion forums, the connections and chat and comments on these to be able to have more conversations. We also have events that support that. So to speak with people like Sofigate last year from the last year's survey and get their thoughts on it. You know, do these align with what they're experiencing, what their customers are experiencing, and enable those conversations and questions as well. The content and publications, bodies of knowledge, you know, a great resource that we see a lot of people come to download, whether they're just getting into it or kind of referring back to it, taking exams, and things like the working group content. So Measuring Service Integrator, we pulled together a working group led by Simon and Michelle from Kinetic IT to lead on that. And we had a number of volunteers, as well as the pitch decks that Claire mentioned to help form the business case. But a lot of great things there, and it's really hard to kind of condense that into this and showcase it. But as Claire mentioned, I'll share a link so you can have a look in more detail. And last but not least, the SIAM Leadership Council, which we also launched in 2023. So we host that twice a year, one in person and one online, for our partners and thought leaders in the industry to be able to come together and kind of regroup. Where do we need to focus our efforts and do more? So things like the BOC refresh, partnerships with certain regions. You know, I see from the analytics that the US, a large portion of our engagement and activity comes from the US. So our partnership will help grow the evolution of SIAM in that region as well. And how can you get involved? Well, there's a number of ways. So becoming a member is free, as I mentioned, for everyone. You can join today, you can use it as and when you want, you can be as active as you like, and we definitely hear the more you put in, the more you get out. So that option is there for everybody. Partnerships, I've mentioned, you know, whether that's from a regional perspective, you're looking to do some research. These are on different scales, different opportunities, but we work with individual partners to make sure there's a mutual benefit for the wider community as well as them as a business as well. So if you're interested, then please reach out to have those conversations. Regional groups, special interest groups, we're growing these every day. We know that there are existing communities in different areas of the world, and we work closely with them to help support them and for them to support us as well. You can join a live stream, you can join the podcast, we have a series of SIAM Plus events. So we've done SIAM and ISO, SIAM and Lean Six Sigma, procurement, a number of different things to look at how SIAM intersects with other things. And as Claire mentioned, artificial intelligence, we know that's a hot topic. So we did a full month dedicated to that, provide all of them to watch back on demand if you didn't get a chance to join live. Content, help create some content, you know, the working groups that we've got. We've also got SIAM in Astrid, so working with Exin to help their competency assessment to include SIAM, so led by Barry Corliss and supported by Helen Nunn and other members, and the event Service North that Claire mentioned as well. So I know there's many people on this call that have joined, and I'm sure if you don't trust myself or Claire how great it is, because obviously we're going to be a little bit biased, but it offers a different kind of feel. It's not, we do try and make it cost effective. It isn't, tickets are limited because it's quite a small conference, but it's very community focused and brings together people who really want to learn and understand SIAM. So there's a QR code on there to have a look in more detail about everything that I've spoken about today. And Claire, you know, the stuff that we've shared, you can download the surveys, the bodies of knowledge, and have a look around and learn a little bit more. But if there's something you want to do and you want to get involved that you don't see there, get in touch, partnerships and things like that as well.